When James discovers his wife Claire's secret affair, his world crumbles. Armed with undeniable evidence, he embarks on a path of calculated revenge, dismantling her fantasy life and securing custody of their children. But just as James begins to rebuild his shattered world, a sudden tragedy strikes, testing his resilience in ways he never imagined. As love, betrayal, and loss collide, James must navigate the wreckage of his family and find a way to carry on while haunted by the choices and secrets that led to it all. A gripping tale of heartbreak, vengeance, and the fragility of life. I woke up that Thursday morning like any other, juggling the chaos of getting the kids ready for school while sipping lukewarm coffee. Claire had left early for another work trip, a normal occurrence in our marriage. She worked in marketing, and her frequent travel was something I'd come to accept over the years, even if it meant carrying more weight at home. At 7:30 a.m., the phone rang. Odd, calls weren't common at this hour. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. Hello. I answered. James, it's me, Claire's voice came through, tight with panic. Claire. What's going on? She explained, her words tumbling over one another. Someone had stolen her purse at a hotel while she was retrieving a newspaper. Her credit cards, ID, even cash were gone. Cancel everything, she pleaded. The hotel is checking the dumpsters for my license, but I need new cards urgently. You're usually careful, I said, doubt creeping into my voice. It's been a rough trip, she sighed. Can you handle this for me? I assured her I would, but as I hung up, unease settled in my chest. Claire's story didn't sit right, but I brushed it aside. Marriages thrive on trust, or so I told myself. Weeks passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm, busy mornings, long workdays, and Claire's seemingly endless travel. One evening, while searching for our home insurance documents, I stumbled across a folder containing financial statements from Claire's personal account. I hesitated. Claire inherited a substantial amount of money after her parents' untimely passing, a sum she managed independently. I had never pried into her finances before. But curiosity got the better of me. The inheritance had grown significantly, which wasn't surprising, but a particular transaction stood out, a $3,000 check written to a local jewelry store just days after her supposed purse theft. My stomach churned. Claire had never mentioned buying jewelry. For whom was this gift intended? I wrote down the store's number and called the next morning. Yes, I remember that purchase, the store representative said. She mentioned her wedding and engagement rings were stolen and wanted replacements. Stolen rings? She never told me her rings were missing. I thanked the woman, hung up, and sat in silence. Questions buzzed in my mind like angry bees. Claire had lied. But why? I became a man possessed. Late one night, after Claire had fallen asleep, I unlocked her phone using a code I knew, our anniversary. Her messages were clean, too clean. Suspiciously so. A deeper search revealed a hidden app, one meant for private communication. I opened it, and there they were, messages between Claire and a man named Greg. They weren't innocuous. Can't wait to see you again. Last weekend was unforgettable. A chill ran down my spine. Greg wasn't just a coworker, he was the other man. I spent the rest of the night installing tracking software on Claire's phone. Every breath, every motion, every conversation she had would be under my watch. The tracker revealed a pattern: expensive hotels, late-night rendezvous, and locations that had nothing to do with work. The final straw came when I found a protection wrapper tucked beneath the seat of her car while cleaning out the garage. I stared at it, fury coursing through me. It was undeniable now. Claire wasn't just lying, she was living a double life. That evening, as Claire arrived home, I was waiting. Hey, she greeted me, dropping her bag by the door. What's for dinner? I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I placed the wrapper on the counter. Her eyes darted to it, then back to me. Her face went pale. "What's this?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. I don't know," she stammered. "Don't lie to me, Claire," I said, my composure slipping. "I've been patient, but I'm done." "Who is he?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with a defiant lift of her chin, she answered, "You don't give me enough attention, James. You're always working." I felt invisible. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Her betrayal was one thing, but the audacity to justify it was another. "So this is my fault?" I asked, incredulous. "It's not that simple," she said. I needed to feel wanted again. "You are wanted," I spat. "By our kids, by our family. But apparently, that's not enough for you." The argument spiraled, ending with Claire retreating upstairs. But the damage was done. Our marriage, the life we had built, was in ruins. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about our kids, the life we had created, and the facade Claire had maintained for months. It was then that I decided, this wouldn't end in silence. If Claire could betray me so thoroughly, I would ensure she paid for it. Revenge wasn't just an option, it was my path forward. The day after our confrontation, Claire acted as though nothing had happened. She bustled around the kitchen, making breakfast for the kids and chatting with them like she hadn't just detonated a bomb in our marriage. It was surreal. I watched her with a mixture of disbelief and simmering anger, wondering how someone could compartmentalize so effectively. When she left for work, I sat at the table, still reeling. My emotions ran the gamut: betrayal, sadness, rage, but beneath it all, a cold determination was forming. I wasn't going to let this slide. The first step was securing evidence. The messages on her phone, the tracker logs, and the protection wrapper were solid, but I needed more. A friend of mine, Ryan, worked for a private investigation firm. I called him under the guise of catching up and casually brought up the idea of tracking a spouse. He didn't press for details, only offered advice. "You need irrefutable proof," he said. "Something that'll stand up if this goes to court. Photos, videos, time-stamped logs." I took his advice and hired a professional investigator, someone discreet and thorough. They'd shadow Claire during her work trips and compile a dossier of her activities. In the meantime, I began documenting everything at home. I kept a journal of her behavior, the nights she stayed out late, and the excuses she gave. Every detail would matter later. The investigator didn't take long to uncover the truth. Claire's rendezvous with Greg were more frequent than I had imagined. They met at upscale restaurants, spent nights at boutique hotels, and even attended events together. The photos I received were like daggers to the heart: Claire laughing, her hand on Greg's arm, the two of them entering a hotel. But the breaking point wasn't the photos. It was a video. In it, Claire and Greg sat at a candlelit table in a cozy bistro. She leaned in close, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. She whispered something in his ear, and he laughed, pulling her hand to his lips. It was intimate, raw, and utterly devastating. Armed with this evidence, I decided it was time to make my move. Claire had a trip planned for the weekend, one of her work conferences. It was the perfect opportunity. While she was away, I packed my belongings and moved out. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "Claire. I know everything. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. Consider this the end of our marriage. James." I wasn't naive enough to think she'd crumble. Claire was resilient, manipulative even, but I wanted her to understand the gravity of her actions. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. The call came later that night. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. By the fourth call, curiosity got the better of me. I answered. "James," she said, her voice trembling. Please, let's talk. There's nothing to talk about, Claire, I replied coldly. You made your choice. It's not what you think, she said, the classic cheater's line. I still love you. Don't insult my intelligence, I snapped. I've seen the photos. I've seen the videos. Love doesn't look like that. She fell silent, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. Instead, she spoke, her voice softer now. I made a mistake. Can we fix this? For the kids. The kids deserve better than this, I said. And so do I. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional fallout. I hired a ruthless divorce attorney who specialized in cases like mine. With the evidence I provided, the process moved quickly. Claire didn't contest the divorce, but she fought hard for custody of the kids. Her lawyer argued that her infidelity didn't make her a bad mother. Mine countered that her deceitful nature and prioritization of her affair over her family spoke volumes about her character. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. I got primary custody, the house, and a significant portion of our shared assets. Claire's smug demeanor cracked during the final hearing. She tried to smile through it, but her eyes betrayed her. For the first time, I saw regret, not just for what she'd done, but for what she'd lost. After the divorce was finalized, I decided to make one last statement. Using the photos and videos, I created an anonymous email and sent them to Greg's wife. I discovered during my investigation that he, too, had a family, a wife and 2 young children. I wasn't proud of it, but I felt she deserved to know the truth, just as I had. The fallout was swift. Greg's wife left him, taking the kids and a hefty chunk of his assets. Word spread quickly through Claire's workplace, tarnishing her reputation. She tried to salvage it, spinning stories of misunderstanding and victimhood, but no one bought it. Life after Claire wasn't easy. The kids struggled to adjust, and I had my own battles with loneliness and bitterness. But over time, the wounds began to heal. I found solace in focusing on my children, rebuilding our home into a sanctuary of honesty and trust. Claire reached out occasionally, her tone shifting from defiant to pleading. She wanted to reconcile, to be a family again. Each time, I refused. Her betrayal had severed something that could never be repaired. Trust, once broken, was impossible to rebuild. And so, we moved forward, separately. Claire faded into the background of my life, a painful reminder of what once was and what would never be again. But I held on to one truth: I was free, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. Freedom came at a cost. The divorce might have been finalized, but the emotional wreckage was far from over. My kids, Emma and Liam, were caught in the crossfire, their world upended overnight. They had questions, some spoken, others buried beneath the confusion in their eyes. Why can't Mom come home? Emma asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. At 13, she was old enough to sense the cracks in our family but not to fully understand them. It's complicated, I said gently. But no matter what happens, your mom and I both love you. That will never change. Her brow furrowed. Did you do something to make her leave? The question hit like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to tell her how Claire had betrayed us all. But Emma didn't deserve to bear the weight of that truth. No, I said simply. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and they have to figure out how to fix them. Emma didn't look convinced, but she nodded, pulling the blankets tighter around her. Liam, only 8, handled things differently. He retreated into himself, his playful energy dulled by the tension in our home. Watching my children suffer was a pain I hadn't prepared for, one that cut deeper than Claire's betrayal ever could. Claire, of course, wasn't helping. Despite her pleas to reconcile during the divorce proceedings, she had moved in with Greg within weeks of the final judgment. She painted their relationship as some great love story, one that had been misunderstood and unfairly judged. It was nauseating. The first time Greg came to pick up the kids for a scheduled visitation, I couldn't hide my disdain. He parked his pristine BMW in my driveway and stepped out like he owned the place. "Hey, James," he said, his tone dripping with false friendliness. "How's it going?" I ignored him, ushering Emma and Liam into his car without a word. Greg smirked, as if he'd won some kind of contest. But I knew better. People like him always think they've come out on top until reality catches up. That reality came crashing down sooner than I expected. One night, a little over a month after the divorce, I received a frantic call from Claire. "James," she sobbed, her voice barely coherent. "He's gone." "Who's gone?" I asked, confused. "Greg," she cried. "He packed his things and left. He said he didn't sign up for this mess." I couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, bitter sound. "And what exactly did he think he was signing up for, Claire? A fairy tale?" "Please," she begged. "I don't know what to do. I'm broke, I can't pay the rent, and I need help." The audacity of her words left me speechless. After everything she'd done, she still had the nerve to ask me for help. "Claire, you made your bed. Now lie in it." I hung up, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and vindication. For the first time in months, I felt something resembling closure. Claire's perfect fantasy had crumbled, and she had no one to blame but herself. As Claire's life unraveled, mine began to rebuild. I threw myself into being a father, focusing on giving Emma and Liam the stability they desperately needed. Our days were filled with small routines: homework at the kitchen table, movie nights on the couch, Sunday hikes through the nearby trails. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Work became an outlet too. The IT consulting firm I ran from home flourished as I poured my energy into new projects. My clients appreciated my focus and reliability, and I found a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. Still, the scars of betrayal lingered. Trusting anyone again felt impossible. Friends suggested I try dating, but the thought of opening myself up to another person was daunting. What if history repeated itself? What if I ended up right back where I started? Months passed, and one day, out of the blue, I received a letter. It wasn't from Claire. Her attempts to contact me had stopped after I refused to help her. No, this letter was from Greg's ex-wife. She thanked me for sending her the evidence of Greg's affair, explaining how it had given her the courage to leave him. She went on to describe the chaos Greg had brought into her life: broken promises, financial manipulation, endless lies. "Men like him don't win in the end," she wrote. "And neither do the women who enable them." Her words struck a chord. For so long, I had viewed myself as a victim of Claire's choices, but the truth was more complicated. I wasn't just a victim. I was a survivor. And survivors don't just endure, they grow. One evening, as the kids and I sat around the dining table playing Monopoly, Emma paused mid-roll. "Dad," she said, her voice tentative. "Do you think we'll ever be a family again? Like, with Mom?" I set my piece down, meeting her gaze. "We are a family," I said. "It might look different now, but that doesn't make it any less real." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were going to be okay. Life wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The storm began as a faint drizzle, a gray veil over an otherwise ordinary day. I remember glancing at the sky as I dropped Emma and Liam off at Claire's apartment for their weekend visitation. The kids were excited. Claire had promised a trip to the zoo, a rare show of effort on her part. "You kids have fun," I said, ruffling Liam's hair. "Bye, Dad," they chorused as they disappeared into the building. I waited until I saw the door close behind them before driving away. There was something uneasy about the day, an unspoken tension hanging in the air, but I chalked it up to the weather and the lingering resentment I always felt around Claire. That night, as the rain intensified, I settled into the quiet of my home. The rhythm of the drops against the window was almost soothing, a rare reprieve from the chaos of the past year. I was about to head to bed when my phone rang. It was Claire. I hesitated. She rarely called during visitations, and when she did, it was usually to argue about something trivial. But the unease from earlier returned, and I answered. "Hello." Her voice was frantic, almost unrecognizable. "James, something's wrong with Emma. She's burning up. I don't know what to do." Panic shot through me. "Did you call an ambulance?" I didn't think it was that serious until now," she stammered. "But she's not waking up. Please, come." "I'm calling 911, I said, already grabbing my keys. "I'll meet you at the hospital." The drive to the hospital was a blur of rain-slicked roads and adrenaline. I prayed Emma would be okay, that this was just some fever that had gotten out of hand. When I arrived, I saw Claire pacing the waiting room, her face pale and tear-streaked. Liam sat quietly in a chair, clutching a stuffed animal. "She's in there," Claire said, pointing to the double doors leading to the emergency room. "They wouldn't let me go with her." I nodded, my throat tight. Without a word, I walked past her and into the chaos of the ER. Nurses and doctors buzzed around Emma's small frame, her body dwarfed by the hospital bed. Machines beeped and hummed, their cold efficiency a stark contrast to the warmth I associated with my daughter. "Mr. Bennett?" A doctor approached, her face grim. "We're doing everything we can, but her condition is critical. Can you tell us if she's had any recent illnesses or exposure to something unusual?" "No, she was fine this morning," I said, my voice trembling. She was fine." Hours passed. Claire and I sat in silence, the weight of our shared worry pressing down on us. For the first time in years, our animosity melted away, replaced by a shared helplessness. Finally, the doctor returned. Her face said it all before she even spoke. "I'm so sorry," she began. "We did everything we could, but Emma's heart stopped. She had a rare bacterial infection, sepsis. It progressed too quickly." The words hit me like a freight train. My knees buckled, and I sank into a chair, my mind refusing to process what I'd just heard. Emma, my bright, beautiful daughter, was gone. The days that followed were a haze of grief. Liam clung to me, his small body trembling as he sobbed into my chest. Claire retreated into herself, her guilt manifesting as silence. She blamed herself for not acting sooner, for not recognizing the severity of Emma's symptoms. And though I wanted to blame her too, I couldn't find the energy. The loss was too immense, too all-consuming. The funeral was small, attended by family and a few close friends. I stood by Emma's tiny casket, my heart a shattered mess. Liam held my hand tightly, his face pale and tear-streaked. Claire stood on the other side, her shoulders hunched as if the weight of the world rested on them. When the service ended, I found myself alone by the gravesite, staring at the freshly turned earth. Memories of Emma flooded my mind, her laugh, her curiosity, the way she always seemed to light up a room. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was apologizing to, Emma, myself, or the universe. Life after Emma's death was unrecognizable. Liam became my sole focus, the anchor keeping me tethered to reality. Claire and I tried to co-parent as best we could, but the strain was undeniable. The tragedy had fractured something irreparable between us, leaving only fragments of what once was. Months later, I received a letter from Claire. It was short, just a few lines, but the weight of her words was heavy. "James. I can't keep doing this. I failed as a wife, as a mother, and now as a person. I need to find peace, wherever that may be. Please take care of Liam. He deserves better than me. I read the note over and over, disbelief giving way to a hollow ache. I called her immediately, but the number was disconnected. Days turned into weeks, and Claire didn't return. She left no forwarding address, no goodbye to Liam. Just silence. Years later, as I sit in the quiet of my now empty home, I think of Emma and Claire. I wonder if Claire found the peace she was searching for or if she's still lost in the sea of her own regrets. Liam is grown now, a strong and kind young man who carries the weight of our family's tragedies with quiet grace. I've come to accept that life doesn't always offer closure. Sometimes, it leaves you with questions that will never be answered, wounds that will never fully heal. But in the echoes of heartbreak, I've found strength, an ability to endure, to carry on, and to keep the memory of those I've loved alive. Even in the silence, they remain.